Okay, I'm just going to accept that I suck at video introductions and what are we talking about today. Basically, someone asked some questions on one of my schizoid videos. I actually left like a detailed comment with a couple of questions at the end, but some of the other things they said just gave me some ideas to talk about because there are some common themes that have come up in some of the things people have left for me. But I'm not going to read the comment out because even though they have like a very anonymous username, they still didn't want that to be put out there. So I've kind of just taken out those common themes. I'm probably going to miss a few things, but whatever, this is how we're doing the video. Okay, sorry, I'm not like a proper YouTuber, so this is just going to be a little bit all over the place as usual, and then there are a few things that I'll probably go on some tangents. Okay, so the first kind of question they were asking is like, that they think that they might have schizoid personality disorder and they're wondering whether or not they should get diagnosed and had some concerns about their career prospects. And see, this is the thing, you've got to decide for yourself whether or not getting diagnosed is worth it, because it's not really necessary for everyone, and it can be helpful, but it can also not be so helpful. How much do you need the diagnosis? And some of the factors that some of you might want to think about is like the consequences for your career, like this person was saying, or for just social stigmas and other things, like maybe it's not safe for you to get a diagnosis depending on where you are. I live in Sydney, Australia, in a pretty chill part of the world, so we've got a lot of mental awareness these days. It's not such a big deal to be diagnosed with a mental illness, but I know in some places around the world, because we do this, it's YouTube, we're international here, in some places around the world you will be judged and you will have some consequences. I don't know, for example, in America, does it affect like health insurance? I don't know, because we have a different system here. But, there's things like that. Some career things, like if you're joining the military or whatever, certain mental illnesses may not fit well with that. Things that you need to be like psychologically sound in, whatever criteria they have. Schizoid, as far as that goes, it's not like you're hallucinating. You're not going to be on the battlefield hallucinating, for example. It's just, I don't know. And when I think about something like the military, the drills that they kind of do, there's reasons for the way that they do certain things and try and get you to be someone who can take orders and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know, you've kind of got to judge for yourself. And for other careers, does it matter if they know you have a mental illness? Now, schizoid personality disorder, as far as things go, is a pretty tame disorder, but just the fact of having a mental illness in some places, some situations, I get it. It may not be right for you. So there's some things I'm probably going to miss other issues that you might have. It's just something to think about, your situation, where you live in the world, what the attitudes around you are like. But so that's some of the negative things to worry about, maybe you shouldn't. But on the maybe you should positives, I can give my own experience, because I am in a sort of safe kind of place. I've already mucked up my life. I'm not going for any kind of jobs that need you to put on some kind of image like you're fine all the time. I've thoroughly messed up my life already. I've got not much to lose, but I'm also in a very stable environment. My parents came to accept my depression, and there's less pressure on me than there used to be. Mental health awareness is a lot better these days. So first point, I'm in a safe environment to be able to be diagnosed with mental illness and not have any real consequence, especially because I fucked up my life so much already. Okay, cool. The next thing is I've spent so many years wondering what's wrong with me, and do I have autism? That's the thing that's gone on for years and years and years, and because it didn't fit, it was just this sort of constant thing of but what else could it be? I don't know what else. Wondering why therapy wasn't working, going in there trying to do all the right things for depression and not finding anything working, and finding their approaches just not fitting with me because they were trying to make me be social, for example, or my very first psychologist telling me I just need more friends, and I'm like, no, thank you. the second psychologist trying to push me to stay in a toxic relationship. I think she was just a bad psychologist, but like, you know, just them not understanding me and my issues, and like, yeah, the standard depression thing's not working. So like, I was like, I need an explanation, because once I understand what my issue is, maybe I'll be able to find a better way, or at least get rid of some of the treatments that are just never going to work for me. So yeah, getting the explanation actually did help, because now I know why therapy didn't work. It's because they were targeting me as if I was a regular person with regular social needs, which I am not. Yeah, so trying to find me more friends was not going to help. Like, there's lots of people who do want to hang out with me. It's just that I feel very tired trying to keep up with other people's social needs. I don't have high social needs. Being too social just wears me out. So, you know, there's plenty of people who seem to like me without me even doing very much, which is good, I guess, but, or would be good if I was a normal person, but for me, sometimes it just feels like more pressure. So yeah, telling me I just need more friends and that kind of stuff, it was never going to work. So now I understand why, because schizoid personality disorder, just don't have those social needs. Cool. And then the other thing, like getting help. I mean, this sort of ties into the explanation thing, but yeah, so now that I know, I was able to track down a psychologist with a bit more of the right approach, who, and like, you know, she's the best psychologist I've ever seen, hasn't really managed to do much to help me, but like paying attention, and she's actually reading the notes that I write and trying to understand me and not trying to push me in these directions. I've been able to like last more sessions in a row than any other psychologist. Like in the past, I would just do a few of the ones that I got from the government and then stop going. The one I saw the longest, like I'd go back every now and then, but she was still no good. Yeah, so the current psychologist I've been seeing, and also being able to tell her, hey, I have this disorder, so please don't treat me like a normal person. I have different issues. And she sort of understood that. She also was more, she's also been more trauma informed. So when I realized I had the trauma and was like, oh my God, glass child, she actually knows what I'm talking about. And so, yeah, once you understand your issues, it can be easier to find, maybe not help, but like the right kind of person. But the other thing is, because I have that diagnosis now, when I've been having issues with Centrelink and getting medical certificates and stuff, that's one more thing I can write down as an issue and get them to cut me some slack. There's still some ongoing things with that for me, and they're still trying to push me to, you know, apply for disability, which just I don't think is right for my situation. But, you know, like if you, I mean, I guess depending on your country, if you have a system that allows you to get more help if you have the right diagnosis, then maybe that's another thing that's worth it for you. So for me, yeah, having the explanation and getting the help, or, you know, trying to get the right help, those were some benefits for me. And like, not just help from the system, but like, you know, with my parents, explaining to my parents, hey, this is a thing that I've got. It's probably a result of, you know, disabled brother. Like, yes, the whole family has gone through it, but I went through it when I was a child without proper coping mechanisms, and that probably explains a lot of my issues. Also, he's still doing this thing where he's waking me up and early in the morning, and I'm really struggling. And yeah, so now my parents are on board helping to keep him quiet in the morning, and I'm able to get more sleep, and that's been good for me. Okay, cool. So there's some stuff. Should you get diagnosed? Depends on your situation, but I hope that gives you some pros and cons to think about. Okay, the next thing is like, so I guess maybe this is more applicable to people who aren't sure, like, if it's safe enough to get diagnosed or if it's going to help them, is sort of like, what if you don't fit some aspect of schizoid, but like you've got everything else, you're just missing one thing. The important thing to remember, I had this thing open, and I've kind of messed it up. But so like in both the DSM and the older ICD-10, because I think they've gotten rid of schizoid in ICD-11, which annoys me a bit. It's just lumped under like general personality disorder, which I think is a little bit narrow considering that, you know, schizoid is probably on the schizophrenia spectrum, so can you just lump it into personality disorders? They didn't think about that, did they? Or I guess maybe they did and they just don't care because it's not an exciting disorder. Anyway, yeah, no. In both manuals, the DSM-5 and the ICD-10, you only need 4 out of the criteria to fit the diagnosis. So that's the first thing. It's okay to have one thing that's doesn't quite fit, because we're all human. We don't fit into these perfect, neat little boxes that we've decided on, some psychologists and psychiatrists sitting down with their research deciding here's where we're going to draw the line. That's a very narrow way to view human brains. Like, they're so complex, there's so much we don't understand. So it's okay to be a little bit different. It's okay to present differently. I'm covert schizoid, which is something that took me a lot of years to develop, by the way. So some people look at me now and think, oh, you can't be schizoid because I've learned to talk on camera. But that took a while. So calm down, guys. But yeah, so, this particular person, I think, they actually had some feelings for their family, and, didn't think that they were completely uninterested in sexual experiences. Okay, so I'm looking at the DSM, just because that's what we use in Australia, but, if you're looking at the ICD, similar kind of vibe. So the criteria: neither desires nor enjoys close relationships, including being part of a family. You don't have to have that one. You can still appreciate your family. I guess it depends also, though. It says close relationships. You could be in a family and maybe care about your family a little bit, but not feel close to them. Like, there's some distinctions you can make here. 2, almost always chooses solitary activities. 3, has little, if any, interest in having sexual experiences with another person. Notice it says has little, if any. Not necessarily has no interest, has little interest. So if you think that maybe that's an exception for you, that's fine. It has, like, you can still fit it if you just don't have that much interest, but maybe a little bit sometimes, okay? And, there are schizoids who have families, get married, have kids, whatever. That's not necessarily an indicator that you don't fit either, because maybe you're doing it just because of social pressures. It's a bit like before gay acceptance was a thing in the Western world, is gay people would have heterosexual relationships because they had to. That was the pressure, and that was how they had to survive, because, things were different back then. And so, there is a lot of social pressure to behave in a particular way. And before I knew I was schizoid, like, I had a lot of those pressures too. That's probably why I've learned to be more covert, because the situation I'm in is just saying, you can't sit around being a hermit all the time. And so I've tried to change, and I've learned to change, but the core aspects of me kind of haven't. And so when I'm given the opportunity not to go out and socialize, I tend to take it, especially since the pandemic gave us all a damn good excuse. Anyway, a socially acceptable excuse, that helps too. Takes pleasure in few, if any, activities. Few. Not none. You can enjoy a few things here and there, but takes pleasure in few, if any, activities. See, the language isn't hard and fast. Lacks close friends or confidants other than first-degree relatives. So, if you're thinking, oh, I do like being around my family, well, first-degree relatives, there you are. It gives you an exception there. But, if you... And it's sort of close friends or confidants. Like, if you're not really... if you're sort of, I guess... you appreciate your family or something, but you're not sharing things with them, you're not confiding with them, you could still fit that one too. And I have to say, like, there's plenty of stuff I don't talk to my parents about, and they don't watch my YouTube, so they don't even find out some of the things that are going on in my head. Appears indifferent to the praise or criticism of others, and this is one that a lot of YouTube people are like, oh, but you're reacting to our comments, therefore you're reacting to criticism, blah, blah, blah. The key word here is appears indifferent. That doesn't mean schizoids don't feel anything. It's just that they don't want to show. It's a defense mechanism that we're not going to show weakness. Not showing weakness, I think, is the defense mechanism. So if you praise or criticize, and that, appears indifferent, that's the key word. Because I think, it depends also on degree. Like, if you were really severe, maybe you genuinely don't have any reaction to praise or criticism. But if you're on the milder end, maybe you do a bit. And yeah, the indifferent to praise thing, I've noticed that so much in me. Because, like even just like cleaning the kitchen or something, and mum and dad will be like, oh, thanks for doing the kitchen, and I just won't react. And I'm not sure why that is. Like, am I afraid to take on praise in some way? I'm not really sure. It's a weird thing. It's something that I'm currently like processing. And I guess like, you know, ties into me being a high achiever in high school, not telling my parents my marks, for example. I don't know if that plays into it somehow. It's just like it seemed like it didn't matter, or yeah, I think there's a lot of factors for me on not being able to handle praise, feeling awkward about that. And then criticism, oh, it just makes me think of like work. Like my first job at McDonald's, the lady was such a nutcase and everything you did was wrong. And I think I have this defense mechanism where if someone criticizes me in a job, I'll just be like, I'll sort of twist it into more of a learning experience. So instead of them telling me I was wrong, they're trying to tell me like, you know, how to do it better. And so I'd be like, oh, so what should I do next time or whatever, and like twisting it. So instead of criticizing me, I'm interpreting it. I'm forcibly interpreting the situation to be helping me in a way. It's a hard thing to describe. It's a weird thing. But yeah, instead of acting like I've been criticized, it's more like I'm shifting it, and sometimes it works. I'd probably confuse people when I do that. But anyway, yeah. So, like, yes, I do respond to comments on YouTube, but remember there's a life that I have offline, and just noticing some of my behaviors and having that one there, it just makes me laugh sometimes. I'm like, damn, I do these things because I guess defense mechanism. Anyway, the last one, shows emotional coldness, detachment, or flattened affectivity. Again, keyword, shows emotional coldness, detachment, or flattened affectivity, which means that you could have any of those, all of those, as long as there's something and that's what you're showing. It doesn't necessarily mean that's how you feel. Yeah, so I hope that going through some of those criterias helps you feel a bit better if like you're missing one thing or don't quite fit one thing. Keep in mind you only need 4, that's 7, so you can miss 3 and maybe have a vague interpretation on others. You could still possibly fit, but of course getting yourself assessed by someone will give you the certainty, but if it's not possible, that's a way to, that's the way to help you understand. And like, you know, as I said, if you do get diagnosed, that can help you with the explanation and getting help. But if you don't get diagnosed and you look at that and you're like, maybe I fit that, I'm not sure, but it could still be helpful in terms of, you know, you can look up what schizoids, you know, the research, not that there's much, but maybe you'll find something in there that helps you understand yourself, helps you figure out things. You know, like maybe you don't, like I needed the diagnosis to accept that I've had trauma, but you might just need the suspicion of a diagnosis and you'll figure out something about yourself. Maybe. So that's just some stuff about that. Differential diagnosis and comorbidities, though, that's a difficult thing. This person was sort of asking, like, am I schizoid or am I just depressed? And the thing is, you can be both, and depression is fairly common with schizoid, actually. Especially, like, you know, takes pleasure in few, if any, activities. That's a classic sign of anhedonia. And anhedonia, like, you know, I mean, it is a negative schizophrenic symptom, and schizoid personality disorder has a lot in common with the negative symptoms of schizophrenia, which is where things are taken away. Not hallucinations, that's a positive symptom. Negative symptoms, taking away joy and stuff, anhedonia. And that, like, you know, when you're losing those bits of yourself, that can be like depression, and you can develop comorbid depression. That's what I have. I'm doing a little bit better with the depression at the moment, but it's something that's just recurring for me. And perhaps because I'm schizoid, that's why it is recurring, instead of like other people who have maybe one depressive episode and then they get over it and they go about their lives. But for those of us with the more complicated mental illness, it can be hard to break out of that cycle. And I fully expect that, you know, maybe in the next year or hopefully further down the track, but I'm likely to have another crash, another depression. Like, you know, my doctor has listed depression as like a permanent thing for me that just flares up sometimes, and so that's a bit depressing in its own way. But yeah, so you can have comorbidities, but also with differential diagnosis. So there are certain conditions that have similarities to schizoid, but some important differences. And I'm not going to go through all that because I couldn't be bothered to do the research for this video, but I know the things in my head. So, you know, avoidant personality disorder, autism spectrum disorders, like there are some crossover things. And if you have some traits of different ones, you could maybe not be schizoid and maybe actually be autistic or actually be avoidant. That's possible, but there also is room in a lot of these disorders for you to have autism and schizoid, or avoidant and schizoid, or a few other things, like as we said, we're not fitting humanity into these tiny little boxes like it's astrology or anything. You can have things that are a little bit blurrier, and you could fit more than one diagnosis, so that's fine too. It doesn't have to be one thing or the other. Yeah, so you can look up some of that. I think Wikipedia has a section on, like, it's a very brief section, but about differential diagnosis. And if you look at that, that might give you some hints on what you might have instead, or what you might have together. And for me personally, schizoid and depression, I'm also looking at some dissociation issues. So I might have something else, and that could also explain why I'm different to regular schizoid if I have something else apart from schizoid and depression. Who knows? Okay, and then they made some comments on, like, trying to live a normal life, through teenager years, I guess, and living up to expectations and then crashing. And I sort of tried to do that as well, because I guess that's the particular pressures on my life, being a high achiever, being expected to achieve, also being the oldest out of 3 kids, and having the youngest be disabled, and feeling like you have to be responsible and try to be successful. And so yeah, this video's already gone on a while, so I probably shouldn't ramble too much, but like in school, especially in high school, which is like once I hit puberty, I think that's when the whole schizoid thing really solidified for me, because that's when a lot of brain development happens, and a lot of the things that happened earlier to you, everything sort of solidifies. And so I very much went into the overt schizoid phase in high school. But I know a lot of schizoids will just not try as hard as I did, and so I think that's a reflection of the particular pressures on my life. And so I was doing all the things. I was doing well in maths and science. I tried to do sports sometimes. I tried to do music sometimes, especially towards the end of high school, when I was like, oh my god, screw all this, I want to try and do other things. But I tried to do all the normal stuff, but like also at that stage, I grew up before mental health awareness was a real thing, and particularly with my school, being conservative Catholic, and they were just they didn't understand me at all. So everyone's telling you that you are supposed to be this way, and so there's just this expectation to try all this stuff and go outside your nature. And it took me a long time, early high school especially, I couldn't talk a lot, and people asking me how I'm doing and all that, I'm just like, I don't have any answer to that. Asking my opinion, not really feeling like I had an opinion to express. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm probably oversimplifying it, but yeah, no, I went through the same sort of thing where I tried, and I had this expectation of going to uni, but when it came time to choose universities and all that, there was just nothing I wanted to do. And just like once I finished all that and realized I could drop out of uni, that's probably when it all crashed and burned for me, because suddenly I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Like school's very structured, and I think the way I work, the structure really helped. But once I didn't have the structure, that's when my real, more schizoid depression nature really started impacting my life, because like I did have depression as well in school, I just didn't know it at the time. I still pushed through because I had the structure. I mean, there were some pretty dark times, but the structure, I think, kept things together. But once I was out of school, into university, and then dropping out and all that kind of stuff, it just sort of fell apart and crashed. And not having that social interest, I think that's probably when it happened for me. Anyway, that's just I won't go on about that because I don't even know where I'm going with it. But that was just something I could relate to, is trying really hard. And I think this is one of the things about not getting a diagnosis early. I think like one of the dangers for some people who get diagnosed early is they might have a tendency to give up. Especially these days, we know more about mental illness. And so if you get a diagnosis of schizoid personality disorder and you go and read the Wikipedia and it says, oh, there's really low prospects for your life, you might be inclined to give up. Whereas because I didn't know that I had these issues for a long time, and, only this year found out about the schizoid side of things for me, I had this idea that I could improve, and that's probably why I have improved, because I was so convinced that there was some way around it. I think my progress this year might actually have slowed just a little bit because I started to give up, but then, yeah, I've still been trying to go forward because I have seen that I can make some improvements to my life, and it's slow going, but it's possible. So I don't know, that's, I guess, a side note is, if you become convinced that you have this diagnosis that has really poor prospects and you believe those poor prospects, that may actually hinder, like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And keep in mind, like, yes, the research isn't very optimistic for schizoid, but keep in mind, they don't research schizoid that much because we're not dramatic enough to cause a lot of trouble or make ourselves even known to researchers. So they don't really know how, like, if there's so little research, how can they know that we have such poor prospects? Do you know what I mean? Like, we could prove them wrong. Maybe, like, and there are people who are schizoid who are going under the radar, who manage to get by in life just fine. But if the researchers can't see them, and they're only seeing those of us who have, like, comorbid depression and are really screwed up, if they only see those of us who are really screwed up, of course they're going to think that we're all in trouble. But, the ones who are flying under the radar, and then also covert schizoids who seem like they're engaging but actually have, that sort of disconnection from, normal social things, whatever. Yeah, like, there's some of them out there, and as I said, there are some schizoids who go and have families and whatever. It's not something I'm interested in, but yeah, so there are possibilities. You don't have to believe all the research on this because there isn't a huge amount of research, and if there's not a lot of research, it's hard to verify the quality of it. So yeah, I guess, in some ways it was hard not knowing that I had these issues and trying to push through everything for so long and going through so much, not knowing why am I like this, why is everything so difficult. That was hard, but on the other hand, it kind of forced me to try harder in a way. Now, depending on how much you're struggling, needing to try harder might actually be worse for you, so do practice self-care and all that, but that's just my experience. Is I think it pushed me to try and improve, and maybe now I have this habit of trying to improve all the time because I do keep trying. Yeah, just something to think about. Anyway, and so, like, in terms of changing over time, they did have some more specific questions for me about whether or not I felt emotions in childhood and what early signs of schizoid there were. So, I think I did. I do have memories of having felt excited when I was a lot younger. Probably mostly before puberty, before my brain really set into those patterns. So when we're talking about this question, I'm thinking before puberty. I do have memories of, there's something floating around. I do have memories of feeling excited, whether we were going somewhere or, like, getting a new Game Boy game, because Game Boys were the thing back then. I didn't even know they were a thing. It's just my aunt brought me a Game Boy from Japan, so I didn't even know about them until she gave me one. And then, yeah, Pokemon came out, and I remember being excited about getting that. I worked out, my parents had no idea what to buy me for gifts, so I started just requesting things, and yeah, knowing that I was going to get a new game or whatever. That would have been exciting for me back then. One thing I know is, like, with theme parks, I definitely remember feeling more excited about theme parks, whereas these days, like, back then, I could go on a roller coaster and be like, oh my god, but yeah, it's especially in adulthood, I've noticed when I go on a roller coaster, I guess I can kind of understand what I used to get out of it, but I just don't feel things. Like, I used to be terrified of going upside down roller coasters, but I've been on a few now, later in life, and I'm just like, should I, I think it depends also how depressed I am, but yeah, I just don't feel that same excitement. I think maybe I felt a bit more while I was on antidepressants, but yeah, I can't stay on them because they mess me up. But yeah, no, definitely in childhood, I do have, like, these vague memories of things like excitement. I'm not sure what other emotions though, so maybe I still have that, narrow emotional range even as a child, that could be an early sign. I don't know. I can't remember that far back. I'm so old now that childhood was way too long ago for me to remember lots of things. But excitement's the one that I notice the most that I don't experience much, if at all, now. Early signs of schizoid when I was younger, maybe just being a bit odd socially, but it's hard for me to pinpoint. I can actually think of more early signs of depression. There's just like events that I can remember where my behavior was probably more depressed, and like things that Dad used to say about like me having attitude, and just acting grumpy, and stuff like that. I think were sort of early signs that I might be developing depression or be predisposed or whatever. And then once I went through puberty, then yeah, the brain was like, okay, gonna be proper depressed now. So yeah, there's stuff like that, but it's so long ago that it's hard to remember. Anyway, so though that's sort of all over the place vlog, trying to answer some questions that came up from this comment that I was left, and some of the common themes, people asking, I think I've got it, should I get diagnosed? Basically, you have to decide for yourself, and like the pros and cons. Is it worth it? Is it safe enough? What are you going to do from benefiting it? Like, how are you going to benefit? Is it just out of curiosity, or is it actually going to help you? If it's just out of curiosity and it could be detrimental to your life, maybe don't bother with it. But if it's something that you think will actually help you, go for it, because it's helped me figure myself out more. I'm still on my journey, but I've made some progress, which is nice after so many years of not really making progress. Yeah, and then you don't have to fit everything in the criteria. It is 4 out of 7, or I think in the ICD it was maybe 9 criteria, but some of them overlap so much that if you had one, you probably have the other. I don't know. Yeah, you can have comorbidities, or you could have something different. If you, if that difference is really important to you, maybe it's worth getting professionally assessed. But yeah, there's a lot that you've got to think about for your situation, where you are in the world, where you are in life, all that kind of stuff, how much help you have access to, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, I'll try and answer more questions if they come up, but I think that's all I've got, and I know I ramble a lot and sort of make things a bit long-winded, but that's just me, not being a real YouTuber, refusing to be a real YouTuber. I'm just gonna do shit my own way. Anyway, hope that was helpful, I guess, and I'm going to go and probably eat something. Bye. I don't have an outro either.